righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you, and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You may be seated.
Worship is a holy occasion. We have a sacred moment that we're a part of as we come together. I hope we never take that for granted. I personally long for and anticipate each time we're able to come and worship. Hope you do too. Thankful for those of you that worship beyond just a few hours a week in a public setting, but your worship to God is personal. It is every day as well. May I encourage that certainly. Great to have everyone here today. And we are missing the few that we've prayed about, to continue to pray for ones who are sick, those hospital, in our rehabs. Several folks are affected that way. Looking tonight, 5 o'clock will be our next opportunity at a lesson on doubting Thomas. Interesting apostle, great study. Be looking at the Gospel of John primarily at some of those. Invite you back, especially if you already doubt or know someone who is. And that covers every one of us, doesn't it? We're looking at a continued series. This is part 2 of 4 on persecution. Our hope is in pain. We'll be looking in Matthew's Gospel today. I hope you have your Bible open to that text. Matthew 5:10 through 12. I want to look at it a little further and then just simply kind of turn some pages. I'll give you plenty of time to get to some of the openings. I want us to see persecution from A to Z. When we talk about A to Z, it's usually first to last or kind of in a comprehensive way, all the elements of it. And I'm not having the ambition to tell you everything in one single lesson about persecution. I do want to look at one book. In fact, this Gospel of Matthew, you could do that with Mark and Luke and John. You could do it with even other Bible books like 1 Peter that has every chapter dedicated to some reference to suffering because of our faith. But in this one, I want us to see kind of a lot of the different varieties, a lot of the flavors of persecution and how it happens and why it happens. This is important, not because we like persecution, but because we love Jesus. And we're looking at a way to find it through persecution, to endure, to come out on the winning side. And God wants that for us as well. Matthew 5 verse 10 is the eighth and final beatitude, those blessings. And so Jesus really, if you think about this sermon with the multitudes listening on shore there, they are hearing Jesus on point number 1 saying that a blessing is attached to those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Persecuted. I believe that Jesus is anticipating what would be the rule and not the exception. It so happens we live in a place and time in which persecution has been, at least, in many ways still is the exception rather than the rule. But from the outset, Jesus says, if you follow me, if you have any kind of allegiance or connection to me, can expect to be mistreated. That's not right. It's not fair, but that's the way it is. And so Jesus says you are blessed. Not that you're happy. Not that you will be able to celebrate or throw a party about it, but you can be in a blessed state even when you're persecuted for the sake of righteousness. Luke chapter 6 this is not, I believe, the same occasion. It's the Sermon on the Plain. This is the Sermon on the Mount there. Matthew 5 is our context. And so he's going to later say, blessed are you, not only when you're persecuted, but when they hate you and they exclude you. You can find that in Luke 6, verse 22. When they hate you and they exclude you. We'll see hate in a moment here. Sometimes maybe the extent of our persecution is this. I'm a Christian. Young folks, your friends are having a party. They're having some kind of a get-together. They know about your dedication to Jesus Christ, and you are not invited to their party. There will be things going on there that they know you probably don't approve of. And maybe you've already told them that you dislike. And so you are excluded. For a lot of people, that hurts. I don't want to be left out. I fall victim to peer pressure. It is so important that I be connected to my group. And so exclusion, that follows you into adulthood as you're in the workplace. And maybe as you enter the break room, discussion is muted. Why? Because of things they were talking about. And again, you're not invited to some of the things that they do. You're not welcome to some of the conversations they have, and that can sting, that can hurt. To feel like you're an outsider, that you're a weirdo, and yet Jesus says that is what you can expect as my believers. He says something interesting in Luke 6:23, again, that's kind of a parallel of this one. He says, I want you to rejoice. And instead of Matthew's account of be exceedingly glad, very, 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 very happy, I want you to leap for joy. Leap for joy when I'm persecuted and I'm hated and I'm excluded. I can leap for joy. I can be so happy. Maybe Jesus means that figuratively, not literally, because it puts me in a prime spot. I'm in a blessed state. When they do that, I can know that great is my reward in heaven. Sometimes we focus on how great the pain is, how much it hurts. Jesus says, don't focus on that. I want you to be in the mind of my reward is great in heaven. I've just got to tough it out for a little longer here. And I realize that I'm in good company. I'm actually standing in elite company. The prophets before me also were persecuted. They were mistreated. And when they endured, I'll be like them. I'll be able to be as steadfast in resisting that. Jesus says a couple of important things right out of the gate here in Matthew 5. Persecution is going to show itself in various forms. Often we'll just have the most minute of those, the exclusion. Maybe someone saying bad things about me. As we look at it ramped up, it'll evidence itself in being hurt. Someone may slap me, they may beat me because I'm a Christian. That might further intensify by being put in jail, at least for a time. We have folks in our country and across the world that are facing economic sanctions. They are fined or hurt some way financially because of that. You look at that in a more intense form and you see folks who are either threatened with death or maybe there's a death attempt on them, and finally you die for your faith. You die a martyr's death. And so those are the different levels, if you will, kind of the increasing things that can happen, not always do happen. And yet Jesus says, I want you to know about every one of them. I would not have you ignorant about what could attend your path if you follow me. Again, for many of us, this is foreign language. But for many others in the world, not just 2,000 years ago, but also in places removed from ours, they know what it's like to leave the house on a Sunday morning and know they may not get back Sunday afternoon. That something could happen because of their allegiance to Jesus. You know, there are folks who are hurt, and violence is in our society that's kind of random. No one is not always picked out because you're a Christian or because of your some religious persuasion, but sometimes it does. One of the shootings, the mass shootings, reportedly had the killer asking his would-be victims, are you a Christian? If they answered in the affirmative, they were shot in the head. Are you a Christian? How would we be in that situation? Would you travel with me a little further into Matthew 5 here, same chapter. And we're going to look in chapter 43 through 45, Jesus saying this. You've heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. By the way, that hate your enemy part really wasn't there. That was tacked on by the rabbis, I guess. But love your neighbor is in Leviticus 19:18. But I say to you, love your enemies. That's not loving your enemies instead of your neighbors. It's loving them in addition to your neighbors. And I want you, Jesus says, to bless those who curse you and to do good to those who hate you and to pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. I want to tell you, in my opinion, some of the hardest words Jesus ever spoke. And he spoke some very demanding ones, didn't he? That goes against the grain. That is not human nature at all. I don't want to be kind to the unkind. It's not easy for me to be, and yet I can do that if I'll look to Jesus, who not only said this is what you ought to do, we see him later by the end of his life, the closing chapters of Matthew, to the letter, fulfilling the very thing that he said there. Why should I do that? Listen further to Jesus in Matthew 5:45. That you may be sons of your Father in heaven, for he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good. He sends his rain on the just and the unjust. Jesus says about God that he doesn't discriminate. He's good to everybody. And so the sun and the rain in the right amount at the right time are blessings. They're designed to be that way. What if only the unrighteous had floods and tornadoes and hurricanes? Righteous folks, I mean, their garden spot, their crops, always perfect. So God himself is indiscriminate in a way and up to a point. And so I can look at persecution in a different light. And then I would have you turn over just a few chapters to Matthew 10. Jesus here is talking to the 12 apostles. He's about to send them out. He's giving them instructions, telling them basically what to expect. In part, listen to what it is. Matthew 10:21. Things are not going to be easy for you always. This might be what you experience in the short term. It definitely will be in the long term. Brother will deliver up brother to death. Wow, that's in-house. That's your family. Father, his child. Children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. You will be hated by all for my name's sake, but he who endures to the end will be saved. But when they persecute you in this city, flee to another. For surely I say to you, you will not have gone through the cities of Israel before the Son of Man comes. A disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for a disciple that he be like his teacher and a servant like his master. And then Jesus says this: if they've called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more will they call those of his household? That Beelzebub is a Philistine deity, the Lord of the flies. If they have called me bad names, Jesus says, you're in my family. You are among my followers. You can expect the very same. But did you notice something? If and when, he didn't say if they persecute you. Basically, it's when. It's okay to run. You flee into another city. Sometimes we have the idea that I'm looking for a fight. I'm wanting someone to kick me. I'm anticipating the idea that I can gloat over my suffering for Christ. I think Jesus says, have enough sense that if you can escape it, do that. Do that, but there'll be times when you can't. And what will I do then? Well, Matthew 12. Matthew 12, I want us to look at two verses, 24 and 25. But when the Pharisees heard it, they said, this fellow does not cast out demons except by Beelzebub, the ruler of the demons. Didn't Jesus say that 2 chapters earlier? This is what's going to happen. This, I think, is recorded so that we can say, hey, exactly. He knew what he was talking about. But Jesus knew their thoughts, and he said to them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself will not stand. The Jews are kind of warned in this occasion, you know what, you can call me what you want. You can dislike me, but Jesus says, I'm giving you evidence that I am the Son of God. And if truly you reject me, as some are later going to do, it would not turn out so well for them. There would be a limited, a lifetime punishment. That is in this life, and that's not even speaking of the eternal punishment. If I mistreat God and Jesus and his people, there will be a payday someday. There will be a response. When Jesus in Matthew 13 is telling the parable of the soils, or the parable of the sower, you may know it as, and those 4 different types of soil, we referenced this recently in a lesson, this stony ground, this seed that falls on ground that's got a bedrock under it, just maybe a few inches of soil, it's not going to, beyond germination, bring any fruit to maturity. And you know why? Jesus says, I'll have you know, in Matthew 13, 20 and 21, he who received the seed on stony places, this is he who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Great reception at that point, but he goes on to say he has no root in himself, but endures only for a while. In fact, it's a limited time, isn't it? For when tribulation, that's trouble, or persecution arises because of the word, immediately he stumbles. Fellow Christians, in the first century, there were those that embraced Christianity. They were walking with Christ. They were walking in faith. And when tribulation and trouble, persecution reared its ugly head, they bowed out. They decided, you know what, I'm not willing to pay that price. Too high a sacrifice for me to pay. There are folks in the 21st century that are faced with persecution. And while everyone is commending them and applauding them and approving them, it's easy to stand up and be a Christian. None of us would kind of, have to bow down and whisper Jesus is Lord in an assembly like this. Why? Because we're supportive. We're in agreement with one another. But the world's a different place, isn't it? It's hard. And so what Jesus is saying is realize, think ahead of time, be willing to pay the price on the front end that when that time comes, I'm ready for it. I'll endure to the end. It won't matter what they do or how much I am persecuted. I'm staying the course. Matthew 14. We're introduced, not for the first time, to a guy named John the Baptist. Happens to be a kinsman of Jesus. And that birth of his, recorded in those accounts, in Luke especially, this forerunner of Jesus, this messenger, the one who is preparing the way of the Lord, has something happen to him that wasn't easy. Simply says in 14 verse 3, Herod had laid hold of John, bound him, and put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. John had the audacity, as you look in the next verse, to say, it is not lawful for you to have her. And then not only is he in prison, but you skip down just a few more verses in chapter 14, 8 through 10. Herodias, who seethes at John, and the message that he gave says, I want the head of John the Baptist on a platter. And Herod reluctantly agrees to do that. The Bible says he was sorry, but because of his oaths and because of those sitting around, he realized he had to go through. And so John was beheaded in prison. You read through the Gospels, you realize this is serious business. To be a part of this loving Savior, I love the blessings. I want the salvation. I need the peace and the joy in my life, but it's a package deal. It's not a matter of saying, you know what, I don't want the persecution. Keep that out of here. John the Baptist, as far as we know, you think about his martyrdom and how that Jesus even knows that his day is coming as well. I want you to go a few chapters into Matthew. Now let's go to Matthew 21. Matthew 21, I love to hear the pages flipping, by the way. Matthew 21, I want us to read in verse 33. This is toward the end of Jesus' life here. In fact, he tells a parable that likely is in the last week of his existence on earth. He says there was a certain landowner who planted a vineyard, set a hedge around it, dug a wine press, built a tower, and he leased it to vine dressers, went into a far country. Now when vintage time drew near, he sent his servants to the vine dressers that they might receive its fruit. And the vine dressers took his servants. They beat one, killed one, and stoned another. Again, he sent other servants more than the first, and they did likewise to them. What does that mean? They beat one, and they killed one, and they stoned another. And then last of all, he sent his son to them, saying, they will respect my son. But when the vine dressers saw the son, they said, this is the heir, let's kill him and seize his inheritance. And they did that. Jesus is telling the parable, if I can pause here. He's envisioning what is about to take place. He's telling them on the front end, before it happens, to say, you know what, this isn't catching God off guard. This is the way it's been. This is the way that it's going to happen. And when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those vine dressers? Jesus is telling anybody who will hear him, friendly, enemy, this is what I know to take place. This is what the Son of God is going to experience. Into chapter 23, he blisters some folks over things that they needed to hear. He's telling them exactly what is true in their lives. I want you to see that with me. Luke 23, starting in verse 29. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you build the tombs of the prophets and adorn the monuments of the righteous, and say, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. Jesus says that's not it at all. Therefore, you are witnesses against yourselves that you are the sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your father's guilt. He calls them serpents in verse 33, a brood or offspring of vipers. How can you escape the condemnation of hell? Persecution A to Z. Look at what he goes on to say here. Let me tell you what I know about what your forefathers, are walking in their steps. Verse 34, I send you prophets, wise men, scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify. Some of them you will scourge in your synagogues, persecute from city to city, that on you may come all the righteous blood on the earth, from the blood of a righteous Abel, that's Genesis, early chapters, to the blood of Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Jesus says, as surely I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. You look back in history and you wonder why Jerusalem was destroyed by the Roman general Titus and his armies. And you realize Jesus told the truth here. It was bad enough that you did it to all these guys, multitudes of them. Jesus says you also are doing it to me, the Son of God. And so in chapter 24, he's preparing in the Olivet Discourse another occasion. Did you realize there were that many references just in one gospel to persecution? Chapter 24, 9 and 10. They will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended and will betray one another and will hate one another. Jesus says the problem is, even among my followers, among my disciples, it will be gut check time for you. Those are not Jesus' words. This will be hard. There will be a natural turning one to another within the family, within a church setting. There will be a selling out on the part of some. That's sad. It's the way it is. Matthew 27. Matthew 27, verse 26. We did a series at the end of last year, 2015, on the cross. And you find that Jesus, true to form, with all those prophecies, not just in his lifetime, earlier in his ministry, but all the way back in the Old Testament, Isaiah and the book of Psalms, so many of those that converge to see a perfect blending and fulfillment of this prophecy. You see Jesus being subjected to the very thing that he knew would happen here. Persecution A to Z. For most of us, in the words of that song that we sang earlier, the Follow Me, don't know that it's a foreign field that I'll die upon. Don't know that I'll be treated to or immersed in a level, a pool of suffering like my Savior did. For most of us, that'll never happen. What I have to be ready for is if it does. Am I ready? I admired the faith of so many living in our current society that are willing to stand up and say, you know what? I'm not going to like it. I'm not welcoming mistreatment at all, but tell you what, I love my Jesus enough to realize that his promise is right. And that if I will endure this, I will be saved. I will be taken care of. My reward will be great. My company is without a parallel here. I'm in the best company ever. I'm among God's saved people who won't suffer throughout eternity, but will be enjoying the beauty and the serenity, the absence of anything that is defiling or hurting at all, while on the other hand, the ones who've rejected me because of my attachment to Christ and rejected him by extension have a lifetime, an eternity of misery and suffering and torture. Essentially, it's this: am I willing to undergo that now so that in the biggest and best part of my life I don't have it, or am I willing to go through my life of ease now and attacking the wrong ones and then ending up on the wrong side of eternity and having that true pain, the intense, more than anything I'll ever suffer here? That's pretty it. That's it. That's the lesson of the day. I want to appreciate how that Jesus has told us what to expect and how to deal with it. Avoid it if you can. Lean upon one another when you can't. It'll all be worth it. Just hang in there. Have the strength and the maturity to say, okay, I am willing to sacrifice this now for what's going to be the payoff, the trade-off throughout eternity. I want heaven, whatever the price. If it even costs me anything in this life, is worth it. When you get to Matthew 28, Jesus gives one of the accounts of what we call the Great Commission, where he tells these apostles, who all but one of them are going to die a martyr's death, tells them, you have marching orders. And you go into the world and you teach all nations. And you baptize them in the name of the Father and the Son, the Holy Spirit. And you teach them all things that I've commanded you. Jesus says, listen, lo, I am with you always. I am with you even to the end of the age. Jesus says, never doubt my presence. I am right there with you. That's in the good times and the bad times. But notice that Jesus gave that condition. You need to be in me. You need to pledge your loyalty to my side and receive that forgiveness that comes at the point of that faith leading to immersion into Christ. And beginning with that, walk that victorious life. Count the cost, pay the price. Cast your lot with Jesus, and the salvation and the joy and the peace and beauty that is part of who he is. Some of you, if you're ready to begin that journey right now, nothing's holding you back. You can start that journey. In fact, we're going to stand and sing for your encouragement. Will you come while we stand?